Hello everybody, I'm Roxy and this is Chaotic People File. Today I am so excited to, for a second year in a row, bring you my all the music books I read ranked. If you don't know what this is, I will leave last year's video down below so you can check it out. Definitely 2021 I didn't keep up with the same momentum, which is a shame, and I am not sure if 2022 will be the year where I get that back necessarily just yet because a lot of things are going on. Last year I only finished 5 books, so this will be a short ranking. And because it's going to be such a short ranking, instead of making a short and sweet video, which I should have done, I'm also going to show you all the music books that I have here with me and mention how high priority they are in terms of when I am expecting to read them, why I bought them, and so you will maybe have a sense of what's coming up. Yeah, I hope you find this interesting. Let's start with the ranking. Number 5 is Ocean of Sound, which is a sort of a classic of music writing, yes, but it's specifically a look into different types of ambience music. And I am not very much into ambience music. I am very into very experimental electronic music. I think I am more into sound sculptures, but as music that I listen to every day, I'm a melody slut, so I am not very into these electronic, very thinky pieces. However, I do find the whole endeavor fascinating. I like this book, but only at times because it's just very disjointed. It kind of imitates the idea of ether and sound, so it goes all over the place, but at times it just feels like writing for writing's sake. There are some insightful interviews and there are some insights in general as to the place of this sort of music in society at the time, because this was written either in the 80s or the 90s, so also very different music landscape. I would like to see a super revised version. This does have like an updated forward or afterward, and it is fascinating to see how he anticipated certain phenomena that have come true, since as a book overall, I think it falls apart under its own project. It needed to be tightened up, it needed to have like a clearer direction, and so although again I learned from it, I enjoyed it, I would not necessarily recommend it. Number 4 is Music as Home, or La Música como Hogar, because I read this originally in Spanish. It is translated from Dutch. It is an essay interrogating the question of, can music make us better people? It's fascinating because it's not dogmatic in the, oh yeah, music is good for your soul, therefore it makes you a better human. No. It really wants to interrogate from a philosophical standpoint what it means to be a better human, and if there is a way to be a better human, then can music really be that vehicle? Especially considering that classical music in particular has been a vehicle for awful politics. Take Wagner. But it can also be a form of resistance, and those things can be in dispute. Take Shostakovich. Although I don't necessarily agree with all of her conclusions, I think the exploration itself is worthwhile and very philosophically rigorous. It is a very short book. If it had been longer, it would have been better for it, but also a lot of people would not have wanted to read it, maybe me included, so it's one of those situations where short and sweet did the trick. And yeah, I do recommend it. That said, I don't think this is translated to English, or it wasn't at the time I wrapped it up, because I looked it up and it has been translated into many languages, just not English. I will do that search again. If I do find an English edition, I will mention that down below in the description, as I always do. Now, starting with the 3 books that I absolutely adored. Number 3 is A History of Piano, which is exactly that, but it is a very informal history of piano, and it's not organized chronologically necessarily. It's organized by loose topic, and so it jumps back and forth. I still remember some of the chapter titles. So the first one is about the piano as an object, so how we got from the harpsichord to the pianoforte basically. But it also talks about different pianists, and it has chapters such as the alchemists, the virtuosi, and it has a last chapter on other possibilities for the piano. It also talks about jazz, but I would say that the bulk of the book is concerned with classical piano, so it does go into Liszt and Chopin and all the wonderful 20th century pianists such as Glenn Gould. And so it is a bit of a mixed bag. Definitely not a book that I would recommend you start with, but if you already have certain base knowledge of piano and specifically classical piano and you love it, then I would definitely recommend you this book. You really need to read it. Number 2 is A Fabulous Creation by David Hepworth. There has not been a book by David Hepworth that I have read and have not loved. He's just so good. He writes with such joy, and even though he adores the Beatles, I am not like the biggest Beatle fan, not in a hater way, I just don't listen to them a lot, but when he writes about them, which he does a lot, he makes me want to listen to them because the way he transmits the enthusiasm for discovering music and for listening to music and the appreciation is so great. And I love that doesn't mean he shies away from criticism, and sometimes devastating criticism, the epitome of what a good music writer is. And so this book focuses on the LP, its rise and fall and rise again. He talks about how this vinyl moment that we're going through is actually quite different from the vinyl moment of the 70s and early 80s. And he talks about several historical LPs and how they came to be and how the market shaped LP production and how LP production shaped the market. It opens up an entire sociological discussion of music in our lives and music also as a social event, the object itself, and consumer culture and how that culture changes our relationship again to music and to the artists, and of course influences how the artists are making this product, but also how some artists have changed public perception of the product by imposing their own ideas onto it. So it's fascinating. The way I'm describing it, it sounds so brainy, but it's not. It's so easy to read. It's so readable. I just love how he writes so much. What I will say though is that I don't think you need, not necessarily to love the LP, because I've never been an LP fan. I've never had them or really interacted with them that much, but I do think you need some knowledge of Western pop and rock music history a little bit. He assumes you know Elton John, The Who, the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, and I have learned not to assume that sort of knowledge. I would say if you're normally versed in the second half of 20th century music culture, you would know most of these bands. Whenever it's a more obscure band, he does provide context. Really good book, really recommended. And then number 1, you know what number 1 is. It was also my top nonfiction book, so I'm not going to talk about it that much in here. Go watch that video, which we'll link down below. It's The Rest is Noise, we know this, by Alex Ross. It is a history of 20th century classical music. It is so good, so comprehensive, a bit dense, but also very easy to read, and it does offer music analysis, which is hard to do for the general public. I'd say this is definitely for the general public, like I understood it, but also I would not have understood it hadn't I learned the bare minimum of music theory. I mean, you can skip those parts, I guess, but you do get a bit more out of it if you understand. It also considers how classical music interacts with other genres such as jazz and rock. It's very open-minded. I find that is the best with music writers, where they understand that all music is interesting in its own right, whether it's your thing or not. Even what I consider to be utterly plain bad music fascinates me for many reasons. So there you go. It's an amazing book. Go check it out. And I don't know if it won, but it was nominated at least for the National Book Award. So those were all of the 5 music books that I read in 2021 ranked. To be fair, finished. There were a lot of books that I left unfinished and I didn't bring with me, so I couldn't complete it. Such is the life of a bookworm. I'm not going to feel bad about it. I thought about just not making this video, but I do think it's a nice tradition and I do want to keep reading music books, and I do like that it's a thing that I do every year, so you can expect me to continue to do so every single year. So now let's look at the books that I might or might not be reading. I definitely do not intend to read all of these books this year, but I will show you every single music book that I own that is here in this room. provide a little bit of context and whether I want to check it out this year or not. So 2 that you may already have seen, because I may have already uploaded my 22 books for 2022 video, which I will link down below, and therefore they are priority. Música, Dictadura, Resistencia, La Orquesta de París en Buenos Aires by Esteban, Buch, which basically means Music, Dictatorship, Resistance. I am kicking myself for not having read it yet. I also have A History of the Piano by Susan Tomes. I own another Susan Tomes that will pop up here that I might read this year as well. This is called The Piano, A History in 100 Pieces. And I guess what I resent about that is that it does not feel like a history at all because it is such an intimate selection. I don't know, I think I need to finish it before I can tell you whether I do think it lives up to its premise of being a history, that it really shows how piano playing and piano music developed through the centuries. Up to now, it just feels like Susan Tomes is telling me about 100 pieces that she loves and why they are great. And those are chronologically organized, which, don't get me wrong, is great, but it is not exactly the project that I was promised. I've learned so much already and I've enjoyed listening to the pieces, but I don't feel like it's a history so far, so we'll see. One that has a high probability of being read because it's short, but it's also on a very niche topic, film music, A Very Short Introduction by Catherine Kalinak. I've been wanting to look more into film music because a lot of really fantastic 20th century composers also composed for film, and actually that was their bread and butter. And so I definitely want to learn more about that. Then another short book, Low by Hugo Wilcken. This is one of Pitchfork's selected best 33 and a third books. If you don't know, this is a collection where literally anyone, and by that I mean you don't need to be a music writer to write for this series. They have hundreds of them. This is number 26. When done correctly, these books are not only a look into the album, although they do provide that, they also look into the artist and the cultural moment that gave rise to the album. And I think that is the most fascinating music writing, where you can enjoy it for the music writing itself and for the music in its own right, but also connects to a broader cultural moment. Then a Spanish collection of Erik Satie's On Music, Musicians and Other Memories. I need to read more because I love Satie and I am fascinated by his ideas. So I feel like a lot of his ideas, when he applied them into his own music, actually made him create fabulous music, but then the way they proliferated created awful music. And so I just find myself fascinated by him. Ocean of Sound, by the way, opened with Debussy and Satie, and I thought there was going to be more of that, but it quickly shifted away from experimental classical, which was a shame. Beethoven in China by Jindong and Sheila Melvin. How the great composer became an icon in the People's Republic. I am fascinated by music culture in China. There is another book that I own as an ebook that talks about classical music in China. And also in Listen to This by Alex Ross, he talks about how classical music is a form of pop music in China and how those two are taught alongside at music schools, and it's fascinating. So I really want to know more. Different, but so good. Big Bangs, the story of 5 discoveries that changed musical history by Howard Goodall. It is what it says on the tin. I think this will scratch the simultaneous sciencey history and music writing itch. So how can I not be very interested in that? My next David Hepworth read, so definitely, you know, this has high priority for 2022. I need to read a David Hepworth book a year, otherwise I'll die, apparently. This is 1971, Never a Dull Moment, Rock's Golden Year. The Lost Pianos of Siberia by Sophie Roberts, and this has been all over. If you are into music history, you will know this. This also pops into nature writing for some reason a lot, or like travel writing a lot, history sections as well. So it's interesting that it's not only music writing. But yeah, these pianos were created apparently in the boom of piano making in the 19th century, and it looks at all their fates. And of course, it takes those as a starting point to talk about attitudes towards music and piano playing and history and material culture in general. This one has high priority, indefinitely. Very, very different, but also not. It also has to do with material culture. It is Vinyl Adventures from Istanbul to San Francisco by Tim Burgess. or Burgess. Look at this cover, it's so funky, I love it. This is basically Tim Burgess, who worked, I want to say, as a sound engineer. He asked different people in the industry what their favorite vinyl was, what that key vinyl that made them love music or like that made an impact in their lives is, and he tracks it down. So it's travel writing, it's music writing, it is a bit of history in there, a bit all of it. The Silent Musician, Why Conducting Matters by Mark Wigglesworth. This man's last name brings me a ridiculous amount of joy. This is a look into conducting, and I think the index will give you an idea. Well, the first one is an introduction called Shaping the Invisible, and then it goes into conductive movements, musicians, music, drama, performances, yourself. So it's part manifesto, part explanation for the lay people, what conducting is and why it's so important. I started reading it last year and it was really good. Really need to continue on. The Right Way to Read Music by Harry and Michael Baxter, and this is touted by BBC Music Magazine as a straightforward, no-nonsense introduction to musical notation and theory. And although I have been introduced to it, everything has been very irregular and self-taught. I've had a couple of online courses, but it's hard. I find it very difficult. Music theory is famously difficult, of course, but I also think I'm especially bad at it. This is a really great introduction, and this one has high priority to make an appearance towards the end of the year after I have finished my master's. Very different, but so right up my alley. You have no idea. I found this, by the way, in Worlds on Water, which is the Barge bookshop near King's Cross. If you are ever in London, please visit this place because it's amazing. This is Music Late and Soon by Robin Sarah, and this is a music memoir about this woman who was supposed to become, I don't remember if a clarinet soloist or a flute soloist, but it was one of those. And I think she actually worked as a professional musician for some time before quitting to become a full-time writer. Years later, as an older woman, she wants to go back to piano. And it is all about passion and what passion is, and how do you cope with your passion also being your job, and does that take the joy out of the creative process? Going back to a teacher and having lessons and receiving that sort of education as an adult can be quite daunting and intimidating, especially as an older adult. I am fascinated by this. It's supposed to be a reflection not only on past and present, but also on the creative process and writing and music and piano. And doesn't it sound right up my alley? Also this idea of like taking many different paths and having it all come together and it's all part of you. Oh, so good. The other Susan Tomes, which is signed by the author, is Speaking the Piano, Reflections on Learning and Teaching. I had this as an ebook and I really meant to read it, but I never did because I hate reading ebooks. I'll do it if I have to, but I don't love it. So I'm glad I have a physical copy of it. And this is the type of book that I really appreciate as being really fun to read, but also like helpful in one's own playing regardless of level. This is my latest acquisition, The Life of Music by Nicholas Kenyon. I like this, although this was not my contribution because I got this at my Oxfam secondhand. It says that £2 from the book sale of each book goes to a charity, help musicians, so that's great. Of course, musicians have been badly hit, as most performers have during this pandemic, so I'll assume that's the reason, because this is a 2021 book and it's a collection of essays revisiting our ideas of Western classical music. Okay, we're almost there, I swear. Lev's Violin, an Italian adventure by Helena Attlee. This once again is material history. It looks at a specific violin, which I think is a Strat because it mentions Cremona, but it also might be a Guarneri or with the one that starts with A, I forget. Anyways, it's about that, and you know I love my material history, microhistory, object history. Yeah, it's going to be great. The Musical Human, A History of Life on Earth by Michael Spitzer. I knew I had to get this book from the moment I knew it was going to come out. And actually, this made an appearance in my mid-year freakout tag video. You can approach this in so many different ways, and I guess it's not The Music Instinct by Philip Ball, so it is supposed to be different, but it's also not like a history of music. I'm just curious. I'm very, very curious to see what it will do and where it will take it. Letters to His Family by Tchaikovsky. An autobiography. Need I say more? Then a book that I definitely won't get to this year because it is very heavy in theory, but I still want to get to maybe next year, is Why You Like It, The Science and Culture of Musical Taste by Nolan Gasser. But basically here the author takes on the almost impossible task of mapping taste. He wants to develop theories of why we have the tastes that we have. And I feel like so many people have tried, not only in regards to music, but in general, and a lot of people have failed. What he proposes is that there are different genotypes of music. I don't know how literal he takes this idea, but it might be like a helpful way to think about these things. I'm not sure. I need to read the book. That's why I got it. One more thing that I want to say is that I haven't been mentioning this, but a lot of these books I got on sale, like this one. Again, another plug for my hardback book haul, link down below, and you'll know what this book is. It's called 5 Straight Lines, A History of Music by Andrew Gant. There are so many books like this, and I want to read them all. So yeah, that's it. That is my general music TBR, and I will stop talking because my throat is so dry, even though I have been drinking water. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe and comment. Have you read any of these books? Do you want to read any of these books? And or do you have any music book recommendations? And of course, this is an interest that I share with Natalie from Curious Reader, and I will link her wonderful music book recommendations and TBR video down below. You've probably seen it already. And it's funny because she recommended all books that I wanted to read already. Some of them I even have in here, and some of them I've read or I have on ebook format. So yeah, that's interesting. Go music writing. Anyways, see you next time. I'll be out. Oh, my heart. Oh my God. Roll that into, oh shit, Mark's Weaver's Rule.